Hello and welcome to the Week 10 edition of the Survivor Podcast. It is Matt Brown. It is Steven Andrus. Steven, if people have made it this far, well done. Good on you. You've dodged a couple of bullets along the way. No carnage last week. We did see the two most popular teams advance. And so here we are on to week number 10, in which we are looking down the board, and we always try to identify. We say, listen, let's make the cutoff. Let's call it 6, like 6 or bigger favorites, and that's where we'll start the conversation. Well, we have Cincinnati Bengals as 6.5-point favorites over the Houston Texans. We have the Ravens that are 6-point favorites over the Cleveland Browns, and then you scroll, and then you scroll, and then you scroll, and you get the Seahawks at 6 points over the Washington Commanders. Then, of course, the massive favorite of all time, the Dallas Cowboys over the New York Giants as 16.5, all the way up to 17 at one book. And then the Bills at 7.5 over the Broncos. So, Steven, if we take a look, obviously, if you're playing in the Circa contest, you can't use the Cowboys. You got to save the Cowboys for one of the holiday weekends. But if you're playing in a regular contest out there, look, you're going to be tempted this week to go ahead and just take the dub and move on. So we'll try to talk through these other options real quick. And if people don't want to use the Cowboys, which, again, is basically an automatic W, Tommy DeVito has no business playing quarterback in the NFL. That's for sure. But we can take a look at some of these other options.
Yeah, I think we take this two different ways, the Circa angle and also the normal pool angle, because if you're in the non-Circa pools where you don't have any holiday schedules to worry about, if you look at the Cowboys schedule, you have a couple of decent spots after this where you might want to play them in the next 2 weeks, at Carolina, home against Washington, and then really a 5-week stretch where you're not going to want to play the Cowboys. You have week 13 against Seattle, week 14 against Philadelphia, week 15 at Buffalo, week 16 at Miami, and then week 17 at home against Detroit. So you're in the 3-week window where you want to use the Cowboys right now. So I wouldn't blame anybody for just, to use Mo Nawara's term in the Survivor column on thelines.com this week, just play the free space and move on. But just know that it's going to be probably more than half the people in your pool that are playing the Cowboys this week.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think at this point you probably, again, if you're not in Circa, it's the obvious play. Just take it, just move on here. I mean, we can look. I'm not into the Ravens this week. I don't think you are either. Listen, yeah, Deshaun Watson's not any good, but that defense is just good enough that wonkiness could happen in a game like that. And so I'm not doing that. You do have a spot with the Rams. And one, you might not even have the Ravens available anyway in your pool. You did get the Cardinals a couple of weeks ago. You did get the Titans. So there's a couple of different spots you could have used them along the way. But if you do have them in pocket, you do have a Rams game in a few weeks. But, Steven, it's just like, look, yeah, Deshaun Watson didn't look good, but he didn't look terrible last week. But the defense is still really, really good. It's not a spot I don't think you gamble with the Ravens this week.
No, as much as they are just absolutely obliterating some of these teams that are in the same tier, in my opinion, as the Browns. I think it's 75-9 combined score against the Lions and the Seahawks. So they look amazing, and I'm pretty sure you're aligned with me that we're ranking them in the top 3 now in the NFL. So if they were, I will say this, I put in an early bet this week on Ravens -5.5, despite my concerns about a divisional matchup, because if they were 6 against Seattle 1 week later, I'm not sure they should be 5.5 against Cleveland with the performances that they're giving us. But in terms of just Survivor and risk, I think there's still a couple of better options on the board here.
Yeah, and I think the secondary option for me is just obviously Cincinnati. Cincinnati against the Texans. Cincinnati now playing like that top 5 team that we all kind of had them power ranked heading into the season this year. And what you're getting in that is not really another great spot to play them until maybe the Colts, but even then, there's a little bit of something going on where you maybe didn't want to do that. So, I mean, it's Texans, then it goes Ravens, Steelers, Jags. So you're not playing them for a month if you don't play them this week against the Texans. So for me, pretty obvious second choice, in my personal opinion, would be Cincinnati. Texans are fine, and they're all, listen, C.J. Stroud obviously balling out, but this is a different animal going into Cincinnati to play against Joe Burrow and company here than what we saw last week for them. And Cincinnati, a pretty solid choice, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. We record this on Tuesday morning, so I would just make sure that everybody out there watching, double checks the injury report. There's a little bit of scuttlebutt on whether or not Jamar Chase is going to be limited this week, maybe T. Higgins as well. So just double check that, make sure it may take you off of the Bengals if for whatever reason Chase isn't going to play. And I'm gonna do updates on this video as well midweek. We did it last week. We recorded last week's show on a Tuesday. At that time, I wanted to play the Falcons and fade the two biggest picks last week. That would have blown up in my face. Middle of the week, Drake London is ruled out. I don't feel good about it. Fired off a response in the comments, another short video for you guys just to let you know that I was not on the Falcons anymore at that point and switched to the Saints. So when those things happen and develop and it makes me change my pick, I am going to let you guys know in the comments of this video. So that's at least just one thing to keep an eye on with Jamar Chase and the Bengals this week.
Yeah, the two other games, again, that we mentioned that would be options, the Seattle Seahawks at home against the Commanders and then the Bills against the Broncos. For me, I would still play Cincinnati. Here's the thing. There is something going on with the Bills. There just is. There's something going on with the Bills.
Yeah, it's called injuries on defense.
They're injuries of guys that aren't coming back, right? They're injuries of guys that are gone for the season. And then on the offensive side of the ball as well, right? It's kind of like it's Steph Diggs and then that's it. It's like Steph Diggs and that's it. And so for me, I need to kind of see that they have righted the ship a little bit before I want to buy in this deep in a contest too, for sure. With the Buffalo Bills, I want the Cincinnati team that's on the up. I don't want the Bills team that's on the down. I don't want to be playing a team that's on the down if I can keep from it. And then the other thing about Seattle, listen, it's a fine spot. I don't know. I mean, who knows? Whenever we have the preview for the game later in the week, maybe we're even betting them or something. But there's just enough Geno left in Geno where I'll trust Joe Burrow to get it done as opposed to Geno Smith to get it done. If we're talking the same spread, 6.5 for a team at home against a team that they should be able to beat, I'll trust Joe Burrow instead of Geno. Geno turning the ball over. This is now 5 consecutive games that Geno has turned the ball over. I'll trust Joe Burrow. That's my opinion on this.
Yeah, and again, this is the if you don't want to play Dallas conversation.
Yes.
To put that in full context. So I agree with you. I do have at least a shred of concern that the Bengals defense still is relying on turnovers and giving up a lot of yards. What happens in that game against Buffalo if Dalton Kincaid doesn't fumble the ball in the second half? We'll never know. But, for me, Seattle against Washington, I think Seattle's just one of those teams that is going to win a lot of games against bottom half teams in the NFL and can't really compete yet with the top teams. We've seen that a few times. We've seen that last year when they got their doors kicked in by San Francisco despite having a winning record a year ago. So I still think that they aren't able to punch up, but they're still just fine to win these games against teams like Washington. I agree with you that I'm a little concerned about Geno, but I still would choose them over Baltimore in a divisional game against Cleveland this week.
Same.
Yeah, so we're kind of aligned there, and I agree with you.
I'd actually take him over Buffalo this week, to be honest with you.
I was going to ask you that. I agree. I'm kind of off Buffalo right now because good spot for the Broncos coming off a bye week. Very quietly, Russell Wilson has a top 4 passer rating in the NFL this year, pretty up there in touchdowns as well. I actually sprinkled a little 50-1 on him for comeback player of the year this week. I think Aaron Rodgers, if he comes back, probably just wins, but he's having a good enough season where Russell Wilson should be getting some consideration if it's not going to be Damar Hamlin. But for this matchup, why couldn't Russell Wilson take advantage of the Bills defense like every other quarterback has done to this point? So
with the extra week to prepare as well and see exactly what Joe Burrow and them did against them and just try to mimic what was going on with, there's a lot of factors in me that kind of keep me off of the Bills for sure.
And the Denver defense, who we were all making fun of for giving up 70 points when they were completely injured and decimated to the Dolphins, they've gotten healthy. And now, since week 6, they are the number 13 defense by EPA. By the way, the Bills are number 30 since week 6. So we're going to be talking about this a little bit more on the Megapod. I might be taking the points with Denver, and it really wouldn't shock me if the Bills just lose outright this week.
Number one for me with a bullet, obviously Dallas, but depending on game theory, you have to make a choice there, Steven. Number two for me, pretty easy, like I said, is Cincinnati. Number three would be Seattle. You don't have to get cute after that. You're going to have one of those three teams available, so you don't really need to go too crazy here in your survivor pool. Like I said, I would play Seattle over Buffalo this week, and like we said, we don't want to get too crazy here with the Ravens. There's just enough punch from the Browns where you just don't need to go there this week with that one. So that's my 1, 2, 3. What's yours?
Yeah, I'm not in Circa, so I'll give the perspective of the non-Circa. It is the Cowboys for me with a bullet. Big gap between the next team. I'm just going to take that free space and move on, considering the fact that you really aren't going to be as comfortable using them after the next couple of weeks here. So after that, I'm with you. I'm going to look at kind of future schedules here and figure out if I'm going to take Seattle or Cincinnati. With the way Cincinnati's playing, I kind of view them in Survivor at this point like the Chiefs. Like, that's a bullet I want to keep in my back pocket for down the road, even if it is a tougher matchup, because I just have a lot of faith in their upside and them being a true Super Bowl contender at this point. So I think Seattle is a team I'm more interested in playing this week against Washington, and then I'd put Cincinnati number 3. But yeah, totally off Buffalo, totally off Baltimore this week, and we move on.
Yeah, it's not. And again, like we said, it's not that we don't like Baltimore as a team. Baltimore, obviously, one of the best teams in the NFL. It's just that you don't have to play them this week. Yeah, it's like you don't have to play them this week, and it's like, if I'm going to play them in a game in which it's like, middling or something, like I don't want to play them against a top 5 defense. Like why? We have an option to not play them against a top 5 defense. So let's just not play them against a top 5 defense.
And if they are the wagon that it seems they might be in one of the 2 best or 3 best teams in the NFL, then that's another bullet you might want for down the road too. I mean, they have games against the Rams and the Jaguars, and if you get all the way to week 18, they have a game against Pittsburgh. So even in its tougher, closer spread matchup, down the road, the Ravens are a team you still would be fine with in a tough spot.
If you went out playing them.
If you still have them.
Exactly. If you went out playing them, you're not going to feel bad about it because you went in with it good. So, guys, everything we do, absolutely free here at The Line. So if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button down below. Give us a thumbs up. And as Steven said, we'll update in the comments if anything changes throughout the course of the week. But 3 teams we are eyeing, and good luck on your Week 10 Survivor plays.